Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business of Business podcast. I'm your host, Roy. We are the podcast that brings you episodes on a wide variety of topics with a diverse set of guest speakers. And today is no different. We have with us Laura Miller. She is the founder and CEO of TempDev, a company of more than 30 healthcare technology consultants nationwide who are experts in NextGen EPM and EHR and development. With personal strengths in development, she is able to combine her strong technical background and business acumen to create holistic and sustainable solutions that go beyond meeting clinical needs and creating positive financial and operational impacts. So, without any further delay, Laura, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. And we're going to deviate. I'll let you talk a little bit about the business, but we're going to deviate and talk a little bit about working from home and coming out from the pandemic. But before we do, tell us kind of, how you got here. How did you get into this space, this technology space in the healthcare industry?
Sure. So I started as a computer engineer as I got out of college.
Okay.
And I was looking for a technology job that actually had more females in it, because in college I was the only female in my graduating class in my major.
Wow.
And the nice thing that I found about healthcare IT was that there were more women in it than I would say like the general population of IT jobs. We lived in Silicon Valley, so you had your plethora of jobs available to you as an outgoing college senior. But I really liked that healthcare space. So I worked for a group that had purchased NextGen software, which is that software that physicians use when you go for a doctor's visit.
Okay.
So you know how they chart on a computer nowadays, or hopefully they are, let's say hopefully. It's that kind of software.
Okay.
And this was kind of at the forefront of that, of beginning to really roll those, that software out. And as I worked more and more in that industry, I started to be recruited quite a bit. And as that happened, I ended up creating a consulting firm from that.
Okay.
And building it out from that experience.
So now, do you consult with individuals about specific other products, or do you consult with them about building building things that are more specific to their needs?
Yeah, so we primarily consult with, I would say, larger healthcare organizations, but more in the ambulatory space, which is the not hospital space, I guess you could say. That's normally how I describe it, because it's the doctors you're used to seeing every day, those doctors. But I think when people hear healthcare, they think hospital. No, the doctors you see. And we consult on solutions for them. It might be programs they want to take part in. It might be payment programs that they want to go after, or grant funding. They want to do reporting. It's all different, but yes, tailor making solutions that might include development, training, project management, consulting, advice. So we kind of have the whole breadth of that world in our firm now.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And so the other part of this is, talking about working from home. I think that we've got some challenges that people have. There's some people, I think there's about three groups. There's some people very comfortable working from home and don't want to go back. And then there's some people that hate working from home and want to go back. And then there's those in the middle that, I like to work from home and, go in and participate with things at the office too. And, with this employment situation, it's just been crazy for the last month or two. It's not, at first I think it was hospitality, the fast food restaurants, they were struggling for help. But now, I hear that this is just expanding to other industries. So I think this is going to be a challenge not only managing that going forward, but, taking a chance on maybe losing some people if you force them to come back into the office. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think what we have seen, because as consultants, we have insight into a lot more companies than I think the average group might. And what we have seen is that that first group, I just want to work from home, please let me, has gotten a lot larger than it used to be. We all figured it out. We all had to. We've been living that life for over a year,
Right.
and they don't want to go back. And I think as the pandemic has started to wane and things are starting to get back to normal, we have definitely seen the job market improve in all aspects, and we are seeing a lot of attrition. We are seeing a lot of movement between companies. We are seeing a lot of hiring and open recs between groups. So I think that, it's just going to get harder as employers to
Yes.
retain talent. And what can you do to improve because that is always my number one concern. It is always probably my number one issue,
Right.
is keeping good talent. Right. And because that is my number one asset, in my opinion,
Yeah.
is especially as a consulting firm, right? My consultants are my largest asset.
Right.
And so keeping them is critical. And I think companies really need to see that in general with their employees, right?
Yeah, and I think it
And
can be limiting. And from my background, I've worked from home for, the most of the last 20 something years. It's just been natural and I'm very used to it. And then your company, you're structured where you have people scattered out all across the US. And I think that, the other part of this is not only, what workers need to retain them, but I think it's that talent issue too. It's like, well, how many people within a 6 block radius of where you live, an office, are going to be good good fits? And that's a little extreme, but we could expand that scope. But the point is that, we kind of limit ourselves as a company with talent that we may be able to acquire.
absolutely. And I think that's one of the keys that we've had to a successful business, is being able to recruit across the US and being able to say, I don't care where you live in the US, you can work for us.
Right. Yeah, and in your business, I'm sure that there's some traveling to be on site, but
Absolutely.
a lot of
Yeah.
things can be handled through Zoom, and sometimes it's a lot more productive because you get your meeting over with, and you're off and on to the next thing, instead of back in the old days when you went somewhere and met, then we have to have coffee, donuts, maybe lunch. It can
Right.
get
Everybody comes and talks to you. Everybody comes to your cube. Yeah. I find myself far more productive at home than I am ever when I go into an office. And part of that is naturally my position. But yeah, it somewhat removes that social aspect,
right.
which, hey, some of it's good and some of it's bad. So I think having that opportunity to go into an office occasionally and having those team meetings or whatever it might be, I think that's still worthwhile and still very valuable, but it doesn't need to be every day. I don't
Right.
even think it needs to be every week, quite frankly.
Yeah, and I kind of jokingly say back, 90s, long time ago, when I did work in an office downtown, I joked at first it was, I just I had the door open, and then got to the point where I had the door closed and people just got where they'd knock and come in. Then I jokingly say, then I had to wedge a chair up underneath the door handle where people couldn't come in, because it seemed like, when you have 30, 40, 50, 100 people in an office, it seemed like it was a constant stream of, from 8 to 5, a constant stream of people. And then, from 6 o'clock till midnight, that's when I could actually get some work done.
Yeah. And I feel like it also cuts down a little bit on the office politicking.
Yes.
There's not so much gossip. There's not so much, we haven't seen it at our company. And I have to think that a lot of it, I think we have really good people, but I think a lot of it has to do with, everybody's not in everybody's space and personal business all the time.
Exactly.
You have a little bit of separation and you have a little bit of privacy, which I think is kind of really key to keeping the gossip and the drama
Right.
out
Yeah.
of it
Yeah.
because
Not
we
being,
barely have drama.
yeah. Not being right on top of each other constantly too. That's,
Mhm.
that does help in that. So what are some factors that you, in your opinion, or what you have seen, why do you feel, the urgency or the need to try to bring people back to the office? Is it distrust? Is it an old school of thought that, well, they've always worked here, they just need to be here? What do you think on that?
I think some of it is trust. I think some of it is absolutely trust. I do think there are some old school people, I'll hear, oh, well, the CEO wants people back in.
Right.
Okay, but nobody else does. So let's go talk to the CEO or let's go talk to the COO.
Right.
I think some people want to escape from their families or work commitments.
Yeah.
I've heard that, they like to go hide because they don't want their teenage child maybe coming and bothering them,
Yeah.
which, hey, have space for those people.
Right.
Certainly make that available, but for the majority, and don't make it like a second class citizen thing for people who are at the office and aren't at the office. Cause I do worry about those kinds of situations getting set up too.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where I've seen people wanting to go back. Or they feel like we've wasted all this money on rent, equipment, everything else for it to just go away, for not being used. It feels like such a waste.
Right. Yeah, I thought that would be a good opportunity for, for the realization that maybe we do have a little bit too much space, too much stuff, and that, if we're able to operate off this, I feel, because if I have an idea or if I'm working on a problem and I get a solution at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, I'm able to walk over to my computer and take care of something. Where, if I'm not at the office, it's a little bit more difficult. But I also too, I realize it from my point of view, it's that commute. I mean, good gravy. Some people in big cities, they have, hours commute. So we got that time we're taking, we're kind of giving back personally. So I don't mind. I think you can give a little bit more because of that, but the costs, the buying the lunches, and it just such a benefit to both sides, I think.
Yeah, I do too. And I have not really heard a lot of valuable arguments as to why
Yeah.
you need to be back. I mean, it's certainly if you're dealing with customers and
Yeah.
like in the healthcare space, but even, as we talk about, I work in healthcare, right? I don't know. Have you had a telehealth visit yet with the doctor?
It's been a while, but yes, I have done that before.
They're amazing.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
like it saves you so much time. So I think even now we're gonna see like a nice mixture of remote work too.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it saves you 2 hours, as a customer, it saves me, the drive to the place and usually sitting 30 minutes in the waiting room and then another 30 minutes in the exam room. So, I just feel like I'm getting an hour and a half of my life back and not having to go. Plus, it's like I think I didn't think about this much before, but now with the pandemic, it's kind of everybody's looking sideways at the people that are sitting around this room with them thinking, what do they got? And, am I going to catch that?
Yeah. I mean, you're sending sick people in with sick people and then you're all getting more sick, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I think the trust to me is the biggest thing. And, I think, like you said, I think we should have more free will. If you want to work at home, great. If you want to be in the office, great. Neither one of you rises above the other because of that. We have to treat everybody equal. But the trust factor, it's interesting because it's like, okay, well, I don't trust you as my worker.
Right.
Now, I mean, if we really examine that, it's like, well, I should probably hire better people that I do trust. But also, I think we can look back and say that the problem probably isn't you as much as it is me. And maybe I need to go through some sensitivity or some training to like learn to trust and open up and not be scared until something happens. Now,
Right.
if you fall off the radar for 2 or 3 days, then it's like, then we can have a talk like, hey, what's going on? Maybe it's not awesome for you. Maybe you need to come in where you can have more structure. But as long as you're producing, why do I really care where that happens?
Yeah, I used to feel like that. And I will tell you, I probably the first 10 years of our company, I felt like that. And then I got burned a couple times pretty badly by people that I trusted and later kind of found out they were, not really as present. And you do get suspicious
Yeah.
as an employer.
Right.
And as an employer, it becomes difficult to, manage that because like, how are you logging? How are you tracking?
Right.
So what we ended up doing, it's funny because we do healthcare consulting, but as all our clients switched to remote work, we ended up doing like remote work consulting just because we knew all about it too.
Right.
So we implemented Time Doctor, which is screenshotting software, and it does blur the screenshots, so I can't like necessarily read exactly what you're writing, but I can see like you're on Facebook, and I can see like how long you're on Facebook. I can see you're on there for 30 minutes,
Right.
or I could see that you're not active on your computer for the day.
Yeah.
And so it's not like I go and I look at it every day because I don't really have that kind of time, nor does my HR department. But if we start getting suspicious, it is very helpful.
Yeah.
And as you do, we're in like 15 states or something. I can't go and watch so-and-so and
Right.
build a case. So I need something to kind of help manage employees. So we did implement that. It pained me to do it. It deeply pained me. You have no idea. And it took a lot for me to get there. But I also feel for my clients. I don't want to ever fraudulently bill my clients for work that's not happening.
Right. Exactly.
And I had to really take it at that level for me to like get to that place. And so it took so much for me to get over there with the trust, because I like to just trust my employees. That's something I deeply feel. But my employees don't care. It's just kind of like, oh, whatever, it's there. And they know that like, unless we're suspicious, we're not really looking.
Right. Exactly.
But it is there if we need it. And it does help us manage people better. Because if we see they're struggling, we can see kind of what they're doing too, and in one-on-ones, we can go, okay, but you're like in your email all day, you're not really doing development. And so maybe that's where the issues are, or it looks like you're just struggling here looking at your screen. Like maybe we should spend some more time with you and help you out. So I think we have found it greatly beneficial, but it took a lot for me to jump over. So I do say, if you are having trust and that's the one area you feel like is making people come back into the office, there are other solutions out there available that can help you get over that hump without making people come in the office.
Yeah. So how does that impact your recruiting when I guess first off is, how do you recruit? If you put, like local ads, or do you, like a local Indeed, or do you reach out, or how, kind of talk about that process? Because I think that's the other thing is looking at, if you just maybe advertise, recruit in a local area, you're only getting local talent, where some way, that you're operating, you're getting it spread out across these states.
So I would say that I would beg that these companies like Indeed and LinkedIn allow that you be able to post a US job because they don't. You cannot just go and post like anywhere in America. I don't care where you are. You can't post them like that. You can't even pay like a premium to post it like that. You have to pick a city. So we kind of just go, okay, we're going to pick these 5 cities and we're going to post recs. Now, we do end up getting people from completely outside of those areas. So I know that I know that other people are seeing them, they're searching NextGen consulting jobs and they're coming up and finding our Indeed. Okay. We use Indeed quite a bit. I find it most helpful because it has a lot of screening options that other sites don't tend to have. But I really wish they would let us recruit from just the whole country.
Right.
And then when it's not working in those cities, we will just switch to other cities. And that's kind of what we have to do, because I feel like as much as we are I don't think we're bleeding edge, but maybe we are. But like, it feels like corporate America has not caught up with us in this regard at all.
Yeah, and that's one thing for being, your size and being nimble and being kind of forward thinking about, that talent issue, because y'all have a pretty specific talent that is needed. It's not just, any pool of workers. But let's talk. And I know that you're not in HR. You don't, you may not have your finger directly on the pulse, but I'm sure you have some idea. So how does it look when you, once you make contact with somebody? Is it like, oh, awesome that we're remote, or do they get a little disappointed that, oh, you don't have somewhere for me to show up every day?
Literally never had that impression. Like, I mean, I'm always the last interview with a candidate. I'm somewhat of a control freak, I think, when it comes to our clients and our employees, but I like to control the brand.
Right.
So I'm always the last interview. So I always kind of can gauge the pulse. I have never once had anybody say to me, "Oh, I really wish we had an office we could go into." And they're like, "Cool. I love that you're remote. This is great. I can work from home. You sent me a laptop. You sent me monitors. Awesome." Like, that's generally how this goes.
So are most of these people, in your estimation, are most of these people that have been working remote anyway, and this is something that's not new to them? Or are these people that have been, because I used to do some, I had a co-share office with one of, kind of like the, I can't think of the name of it, but where they have
It's like
different,
WeWork or
yeah. Similar to that. And there was a lot of developers in there that,
Mhm.
they were working for companies spread out all over. So it may be a little more prevalent in your world, but I guess thinking about those people that you talk to, is this like, oh, wow, I've never had this opportunity? Or is it like, hey, I've been doing this for a long time anyway?
I would say it's like 50-50.
Okay.
I think that there are enough company, especially if they've been consultants before. I think more of them have been remote. If they're coming straight from like a practice, most of them have never been remote. So there are some growing pains.
Yeah.
There are some coaching. There's some coaching we have to do around like, hey, here's some advice about how we do remote work, because I think there is a certain learning curve
Right.
to being remote. And to me, it's like you have to have a routine and things like that, or it just doesn't work out very well for you. And I think that not everybody's made for it too.
Yeah, exactly. So have you won some candidates? Have you won them over that maybe you were in a competition for the talent with another company, and they're like, oh, I love this model, I'm gonna,
I'm pretty sure we have. I don't know if they've actually told us like, oh, that was the deciding factor, but I'm pretty sure we have.
Do y'all have any specific questions, or if you can even tell? I guess it's hard to. Everybody puts on their best face for an interview, but do y'all have any specific questions that you're asking based around the home base? Do you have a segregated area to work in? Do you have an internet connection, a dedicated, you have to have a dedicated phone? Back in the day, it's like you had a dedicated line for the fax machine, but those are long gone. But are there things like that y'all try to talk to them about prior to hiring?
So, my dad and I were having this conversation this weekend, because he was like, well, what do you do for remote like people? And I'm like, well, we do like an internet and cell phone stipend, and we pay people for that. And we just do a flat rate to pay for it. And he's like, well, what about people who can't get internet to their home? And I'm like, Dad, we've literally never had that person. Because I think for us, the people like we're recruiting are people that like probably would always have Netflix and want to stream television in their house. I think that's just, we're recruiting tech people. And I think tech people want fast internet.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I've really ever had that as an issue. But we do ask people like, have you ever worked from home? Do you have a quiet place you can work? We did have one time an employee who was really struggling working from home. So we picked up the cost of like a WeWork type situation, because it just was working out. It would work out better for that employee. I think sometimes you just have to figure out what's going to be the best situation for your employees and go with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm lucky. I started this, when my kids were middle school, high school. They were older, but I can only
Mhm.
imagine, if you have smaller kids, big family, a lot of activity going on, it may be a little bit distracting to be at home. But I just feel so much more productive. And kind of going back to your internet, we had a little pre-show discussion about that. I've been having some internet issues, but I live in the 12th largest city in the US, and we don't have the infrastructure in our particular place. I mean, we have no cable. Cable TV is 4,937 feet away from me, and we had an old copper cable, so we survived off of hotspots for many years. And before we got a new fiber buried in over the last month, but prior to that, we had 4 hotspots that we'd burn through a data in about a week. It's
Right.
difficult. And like I actually had one guy that I had to put off on taping, and after a couple weeks, he's like, "What? Do you live in a third world country, or do you live in the States?" I'm like, "No, I live here." It's just, it's a very unique situation. But yeah, I think you're right that most techie people, that they probably do some coding and stuff on the side, that they probably always have some pretty decent internet.
Yeah. But it is a sad state when, a lot of a good majority of Americans don't have access to good broadband,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I think as a city folk forget that
yeah. Right.
sometimes. I totally do. I will admit it that is something I completely forget about.
Well, and what's been kind of cool here is the pandemic enlightened a lot of even some of the urban districts that they didn't have, some of their students, families couldn't afford it. So
Mhm.
some of them are starting to build out their own Wi-Fi networks, and I just wonder, I wonder how long that's going to be before that's just something that's an added value for the city, is just to already have that built out. I don't. We may be a long way off, especially out, with me on the outskirts of town. But I can only imagine, in the city, it wouldn't take that much, really.
Right. Yeah, and especially with 5G coming out too. And
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Well, so any other aspects of the work from home, either on the, because I see you work from home, so you partake in that. So any other things that you want to talk about, either from the work from home person or from the employer's perspective?
One thing I will say is that what we've seen of the pandemic, right, is women leaving the workforce, right, in mass numbers.
Right.
And I think for my own personal experience, because I have had both my children as a work from home employee,
Yeah.
right? Also the employer, but also as an employee. And I try to think of how I could have done it going to an office every day.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I could have in a two working parent home.
All right.
I was home, I got to see my kids, and I did have a nanny, I did have help, which I was incredibly fortunate for. But even now I don't actually have one anymore, because once my kids could go to school, I just
Right.
didn't really feel like I needed that. But when my kids are sick, I can just run to their school and get them and bring them home, and they can hang out at home. And my employees are none the wiser that I'm like managing this too. My
Right.
clients are none the wiser. Maybe I'm taking a call from the car while I'm going and getting them, but nobody really notices. And I wonder if employers had been more flexible, if people had been more forgiving about childcare. I wonder how many women would have left the workforce
Right.
or had to.
Yeah.
I think you and I had talked a while ago about just working in different hours,
Right.
right? If women had been able to kind of work a little bit later and maybe helped their kids during school hours.
Right.
Because I would say that was the hardest part of my life, was when my kids were out of school. They were home. My husband and I were still working. I was trying to make sure that my company was going to survive. And we were the lucky ones, right? We were the employed ones.
Right.
And that was so difficult because we had nobody here to help us. We were struggling so much. But if people had been flexible about like, oh, you could just work at night as long as you're productive, as long as you're getting the work done, or hey, get half the work done you used to because hey, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Like, let's just do what we can for each other. Like I wonder what would have been different because I find that such a shame. And I think that if we want to think about how to get women back in the workforce, if we want to think about how to make work a better place for mothers, because I keep reading about how, the birth rate goes down. How are we supposed to have a bunch of kids and like go to an office and somehow take care of our kids when they're sick and like take them to all these appointments and deal with that, and their summers are off and everything else? No wonder the birth rate is down.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's the stigma as well as just the struggle is that, I think that when you have to, if you're in an office and you have to go to somebody and say, look, I've got a sick child, I have, it's unrightful, but it still happens. It's that stereotype. Well, she doesn't really care about the job. And the unfortunate part, as and I'll say from a male point of view, is we put a lot of the burden on the females and the women, for the child care, things like that. I mean, you can't even imagine if I was having to take care of a sick kid. I don't know what would happen. Both of us would maybe, disappear. But the other part of this, I had a guest not long ago on aging. And so we've not only got the children, but now we have some women that are moving to taking care of elderly parents. And the unfortunate statistics show that usually the daughter-in-law even takes care of the husband's family too. So they get to take care of the kids, and then they get to take care of the parents in old age. And again, it's caused a lot to leave the workforce just because they can't juggle it all. They feel like if they're at an office, they're not at home, maybe closely supervising somebody. And when they're home, they're not paying attention to the office. And then the flack between, hey, you need to be here. And, just all of that, where again, it's not the total panacea, but that's where we get back to the work from home option. It really solves a lot of these problems, especially if you're in a position that, did it really matter if you wrote that report at 2:00 in the afternoon or at 8:00 at night? There are certain functions of jobs that it just really doesn't matter as long as it gets done, what time it actually took place or the location.
And, it's funny. My one of my employees, her son's, the father is always listed on the school paperwork, like in an emergency, call the dad. And the dad has never been called ever to pick up the kids from school. It is always mom. And she's like, even if you try, it doesn't happen. And yeah, I think, we were talking about the drama of, office politics. If they're not seeing you go and pick up your kid, if they don't even know what's happening,
right?
I think it kind of cuts that down quite a bit. Because, and I wonder how much worse it's going to get, because I'm sure almost every mom will admit that at some point or another, we've all given our children Tylenol when they've woken up with a fever and sent them to school.
Yeah.
We are definitely not doing that anymore after COVID, or I would at least hope not. Right. So I think now we're going to be really forced to keep our kids, or not forced, but I think we all see the issue with sending our kids to school sick, right? After we saw what happened with COVID. And so we're going to have kids home even more.
Yeah.
And we need an alternative for that, because it's just going to fall on the moms no matter what. And I have I have a husband who is very good at trying to pick up some of the responsibility, but even then it falls on me.
Yeah. And I was going to say, on the emergency contact list, that I'll give you a little insight there, is that the dads have the emergency contact. Like, when you're contacted in an emergency, it's like they have the wife's phone number. Like, they just pick up the phone, call and call her, like, hey, the school's calling. We got problems.
They're like auto forward. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, Laura, thanks so much for taking time out of your day to talk to us. I think this is it's going to be more and more of an important issue, I think, as we get through this pandemic. And I've read a lot of stuff that said it actually can change the landscape of, employment and employee and that relationship going forward, because they said, I don't remember the exact percentage, but I think it was around 40% of workers just said, I'm not going back. I'll just go do
Yeah.
something different. And right now there seems to be, a lot of churn, a lot of positions are coming open. And so they actually have that, the option to do that. So I think as employers, we have to be very mindful. If we're going to retain our top talent, we have to listen to them. What is their position, and figure out a good way to manage it. I think there's always a solution.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I think this is a conversation that needs to keep happening.
You bet. So what is a tool or a habit that you use in your daily life that really adds value?
So, well, I did Time Doctor, so I told you about
Yeah,
that.
right.
I would also say Teams has been our, that is like the number one thing that is probably the most valuable thing to me, because I'm in meetings all day, actually probably on Teams, but I can have lots of conversations with my own employees and DM them and talk to them all the time. And it's able to allow me to communicate effectively, because hey, remote work, right? We have to be able to communicate. And I think it helps us keep in touch and keep a good relationship with our employees. And I find it very valuable.
Yeah, it's been a, kind of migrating from the old Skype days. It was it was awkward and bulky, but they've done a good job with Teams.
Oh, I love Teams. Yeah, no, it's so much better than Skype.
Right. All right. Well, tell us again about TempDev, and tell us what y'all do, who you like to work with, how you help them, and of course, how can somebody reach out and get a hold of you?
Sure. So we are a consulting firm that primarily works with ambulatory physicians. We specifically work on the practice management side with revenue cycle, medical billing, and also the EHR. We primarily work with NextGen, but we also work with other ones as our clients somewhat want to. But again, we're like a NextGen preferred partner, so we like to stay in that wheelhouse. We can be found at tempdev.com or by emailing us at info@tempdev.com.
Okay, great. Well, again, thanks so much. Hope you have a great rest of the day. That's going to do it
Thank
for
you.
another episode of the Business of Business podcast. Of course, you can find us on the web at www.thebusinessofbusinesspodcast.com. We're on all the major social media platforms, and a video of this interview will go up when the episode goes live. So until next time, thanks for listening. Take care of yourself and take care of your business.